women are looking for safety, and if they don't feel safe, they're going to leave. And I will tell you one other thing, Matt. Men will leave because of pay parity. If they feel that someone else is making more money and they're not, or someone else is getting better loads, that's why men leave, because of pay parity. In addition to the family issues. The family issues are more at the beginning, but later it's pay parity.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Freight Forward podcast. I'm Matt Dixon, and I'm a tech guy, a CTO, and I've been in the industry a while. And we have someone else here joining us. This is Ellen Voie. She founded the Women in Trucking Association in 2007 after decades in the industry. She got her commercial driver's license in 2000 to understand the challenges of drivers, and she hosted a SiriusXM show on the Road Dog channel for years. And she recently published a book, From Dispatcher to Disruptor. So with that, Ellen, thanks for joining us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll get started.
Okay. Well, thank you. And it's actually Voie. It's a Norwegian name.
Okay.
Yep.
It's a what kind of name?
It's Norwegian, believe it or not.
Norwegian.
So I'm like many other women who end up in the trucking industry. I didn't plan on being in the trucking industry. I was working at a steel fabricating plant and when I was 19, and I was just drawing material handling equipment, and they came and asked if I wanted to move into traffic. And they sent me to school for traffic and transportation management. That's how I got my career start in the trucking industry. Worked my way from assistant traffic manager to traffic manager. And then when I was raising my family, I did consulting for 18 years. And during that time, I have 2 children. And during that time, I received my bachelor's and my master's in communication. And I wrote my thesis on the complex identities of women married to professional drivers. So everything I do has been about the trucking industry and families and, just this, I'll say the personal side of the industry. So then I was hired by an organization called Trucker Buddy International. They're a pen pal group. Worked there as executive director for 6 years. And I was recruited by Schneider, the orange trucks, and they asked me to figure out how to attract and retain non-traditional groups, and that included women. So I started doing research on how do we bring more women into the industry? What do women look for? Why do they leave? And I belong to a women in aviation organization, and it struck me that there wasn't one for women in the trucking industry. So I started it in 2007, put together a board of directors, did all the incorporation papers with a wonderful attorney, and we were formed in March of 2007.
So tell me answer to an ignorant question. Why is it important for women to be in trucking?
It's more important for the trucking industry because, first of all, they keep saying that we need more drivers, and they hadn't even thought about half the population. And so the other thing is women are more risk averse. So aren't we all about safety and logistics? So the American Transportation Research Institute came out with a crash causation study and found that male commercial drivers were 20% more likely to be involved in a crash in every statistically significant area than female commercial drivers. So wouldn't you want someone who's more risk averse with 80,000 pounds behind them? So there's lots of reasons why the industry needs more women. Even in the C-suite, women are more risk averse making decisions. And women are wonderful safety directors and also diesel techs. So, there's lots of roles for women in the industry that women might not have thought of. So the goal is to tell women, these are great jobs and you can do them.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think the male mentality is, I got this. And so that works out well in a lot of areas. In safety, it's not so much. So tell me about building your Women in Trucking and how did that look like and how did you get that off the ground and make it such a big organization?
Well, I can tell you it wasn't easy. I started Women in Trucking, as I said, in March of 2007. And what happened that year? We hit a recession. So I already had some credibility in the industry from running the Trucker Buddy program. And the women I put on the board were pretty influential and pretty well known. So, for example, I had Lana Batts, and she was the former president of Truckload Carriers Association. So the women on the board were very influential in the industry. And who's going to say that you don't want more women? Who's going to look me in the eye and say we don't want women in our company? I mean, that just doesn't happen. So the biggest challenge at the beginning was finding data. Like, why should you hire more women as safety directors? Why should you hire more women drivers? Why? Because people had this mentality that, excuse me, that women didn't want the job. And that's not the case at all. Women did want the jobs, but they didn't know that they were wanted. So it was matching that message to women outside the industry to say, we do have jobs and we will train you, and we'll make sure that you're successful. And that's really what Women in Trucking was all about, was to provide information, benchmarking. We came out with a lot of data, worked with a lot of universities on lots of information on everything from why do women leave, what do women want from a carrier, different things, even maternity policies at carriers, which nobody had ever thought about. So we came up with a lot of data, did a lot of networking, benchmarking, and provided resources to our members.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't really think that women would want those jobs either, just at a glance. But obviously I was wrong. So a little bit more about the past. I've been in the tech industry 25 years. I've seen a bit of change. What have you seen in your 30 years in the logistics space?
Well, the biggest change, and I'd like to take some credit for it, is the fact that the industry has changed to accommodate people as people and not just someone who gets in the truck and can maneuver a truck, or can operate a forklift or whatever. The industry has really changed its perspective to how can we help our employees find a better work-life balance? And that's very difficult in the trucking industry because especially the new drivers who are paying their dues with the big carriers and they're gone for weeks at a time. That's really hard. But the companies are really saying, we need to help them. We need to support their families. We need to provide ways for them to have mental health and things like that. That didn't happen in the past. The other big thing, and since you're in tech, you know this, truck drivers 30 years ago were loners. They loved being in the truck. They loved just driving and not having anyone looking over their shoulder. Well, first we got Qualcomm. We knew where the truck was at all times. Now we have inward facing cameras. We have all the technology on the tractor and the trailer and the load. So we know just about everything they're doing. So that has changed how our drivers, the type of drivers that we need to attract, because in the past it was someone who was a loner. Well, it's not always a loner anymore because they're being watched by everyone.
Yeah, Big Brother's watching was probably the initial take on that when they introduced those cameras. Yeah, that's interesting. So let's see. I lost my spot in my notes. So I've heard there's a driver shortage still. It's always in the headlines. But from your perspective, is it a shortage or is it just retention? You mentioned retention a little bit earlier ago.
No, I think it's retention. There's so many people out there with CDLs and they wash out in the first 3 months typically. And the worst, the washout for drivers is just the first 3 months. And I think the industry doesn't prepare them well enough or prepare their families. I actually wrote a workbook a few years ago for a driver to take home to their family and say, what holidays are important, and by the way, what happens if the sewer backs up? Who's the plumber? Who do I call? And, what if, grandpa passes away and I'm 3,000 miles away, talking about those challenges. So a lot of times, in fact, the data has shown that the reason men leave is because of family issues. Their family at home just can't handle it. The reason women leave is because they don't feel safe.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought it would have been the same reason.
Nope.
I didn't even think about that.
Well, so women need to know that their carrier is looking out for them. And there's three parts to that. The first part is well-maintained equipment, because equipment that's broken down isn't safe. And so I would say, and I only know this anecdotally because women have told me, but more women will look at the safety record of a carrier and their scores, at the DOT before they'll go to the carrier because they want to know that they're safe. Secondly, where are you sending them? Are you sending them to the Bronx, a dark warehouse, things like that? And the third is the driver the quote unquote captain of their own ship. So if I say to you, it's a protest in that area, or there's a storm coming, or there's a tornado coming, and if you said, well, that's trucking, that's not the kind of carrier I want to work for. And that happens all the time. You know that happens. So women are looking for safety. And if they don't feel safe, they're going to leave. And I will tell you one other thing, Matt.
Yeah.
Men will leave because of pay parity. If they feel that someone else is making more money and they're not, or someone else is getting better loads, that's why men leave, because of pay parity. In addition to the family issues are more at the beginning, but later it's pay parity.
So they'll just go find another carrier, or they'll quit altogether?
They'll find another carrier typically if they've been in the industry for a while. The ones in the first 3 months, they wash out. They'll go into construction, or they'll do something, or they'll drive an Uber.
Yeah, that's another option. That wasn't an option a while ago, but it is now. Excellent. All right, so we talked a little bit about technology. How do you see technology changing opportunities? Like there's talk about AI and autonomous vehicles, if I could say it right.
Yeah.
What do you see that happen? What do you see in that area?
When people ask me about the trucking industry and driver shortages and how autonomous vehicles will affect that, I'm going to say straight out, you will not see driverless trucks in a common way in my lifetime. Now, you will see trucks out there testing, but mostly the driver's role is going to change. So you'll still have an operator. Okay, just think about an airplane. Airplane has autopilot. In fact, you've got drone airplanes where someone can sit on the ground and, do the airplane. But would you get into an airplane with no pilots in that cockpit? I wouldn't.
Yeah,
So,
I hear
we
you.
we still have a ways to go. But the positive thing about the autonomous vehicles, which again, I believe will always need an operator in there, their role might change, but you don't know what's going to happen if a deer runs in front of you, you blow a tire, you hit construction, whatever. I mean, there's just too many unknowns where a human being still has to be there. I see in the future we might have autonomous trucks, but not yet. But secondly, the good thing about the autonomous vehicles, and I've ridden in them, they're pretty amazing how much they know. So the positive thing is all the technology that they're putting on those autonomous vehicles means the trucks and the drivers and the roads are safer. They're removing a lot of driver error. So if you can put the LiDAR and the radar and the lane departure and all that technology on the truck, it removes a lot of the driver errors. It does make our roads, our trucks, and our drivers safer.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what about electric vehicles? Do you think is that going to take off?
It's interesting. That's almost a political question right now, especially in light of, the changes that this administration has made in regards to requiring electric vehicles. So I think that the industry, which I'm glad that the industry has the opportunity to push electric vehicles instead of the government telling the industry to do it. So I think that's a positive. And I think the industry is I think you're going to see more LNG. I think you're going to see CNG. I think you're going to see more alternative fuels before you're going to see the electric vehicles, because you can't put an over-the-road truck. You can't have electric vehicles. First of all, the batteries are way too heavy at this point. Secondly, there's no charging stations. And thirdly, they're not going to sit there and charge for 6 or 8 hours when they can fuel in 30 minutes. So it's going to take a long time to get the over-the-road group involved in electric. Now, they're great for like the vehicles that go out during the day and are back at the depot at night. I mean, there's a place for electric vehicles in our industry, but I wouldn't generalize that all trucks are going to adopt electric vehicles in the near future.
Yeah, well, also the power consumption too. Like AI is taking all the power, and then charging stuff is going to take a lot of power. We haven't really figured out that infrastructure piece yet. I think a lot of people are scared of certain things. So we talked a little bit about a book, From Dispatcher to Disruptor. So what's the one story that you almost didn't include?
That's a good question. No one's ever asked me that question, so that's pretty good. So in the book, I talk about starting and growing the Women in Trucking Association. And one of the things that I always was adamant about was that we wouldn't lobby. I felt that you had the American Trucking Associations out there lobbying for carriers, and Owner-Operators Independent Drivers Association out there lobbying for drivers. And since I retired 2.5 years ago, the new management decided they were going to hire a lobbyist. Now they call him a government affairs specialist, but he's a paid lobbyist. I really wish, I almost didn't put that chapter in because I knew I was going to make people upset, but I felt it needed to be said. And I still firmly believe that Women in Trucking Association does not need a lobbyist.
Yeah. Sometimes that spiky opinion though is what what really pulls someone in.
Well, I've been
That's
vocal
an
about
inner
it, and I told the
yeah.
board about it. I mean, I stood there for 18 years and told people your dues are not paying a lobbyist. And now their dues are paying a lobbyist.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So who should read that book?
So I would think anyone who wants to start a nonprofit, because I talk about the challenges I face in starting it and growing it. So, and there's so many people I talk to who want to start a nonprofit for different reasons. Secondly, anyone who's interested in gender diversity, because I talk about the challenges in getting the trucking industry to accept the fact that, women bring a different perspective to the industry. And third, there's a lot of history of the trucking industry in there. I may not look that old, but I've been in the industry for over 40 years, and I started before deregulation. And so that was back when trucks were all bound, or the trucking industry was bound by tariffs. And I worked for a steel fabricating plant, and our freight was very heavy. It wasn't breakable. It was very expensive to haul. And so everyone loved it. And I tell stories in there about how I was bribed. And we're talking back in the 70s. And because they wanted my freight, but they didn't, it was a different industry back then.
Yeah, everything was different. You didn't even have to wear seatbelts if you didn't want to.
It was different. We
Sometimes.
had 43-foot trailers. I mean,
Very cool. So what was the one thing you learned about writing your book that you didn't think you'd learn?
writing the book makes you very vulnerable because you're sharing your story. So
Yeah.
the very first chapter starts out with your mom's in a coma. I mean, that's the very first words of the book. And when I was 19 years old, my mom was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And so that's why I moved back to Wisconsin to work at the steel fabricating plant. And the day she died, I walked out, literally didn't come back for almost 3 weeks because I moved out of my apartment, moved back with my dad. And when I walked back in to the steel fabricating plant, they said, well, the president wants to talk to you. And I thought, I'm getting fired. But I didn't care. I mean, I literally didn't know what to do with my life. I was by that time 20 years old, just lost my mom. And he called me in his office and he said, we'd like to offer you this opportunity to move in the traffic department and we'll pay for you to go to school. So it was something that I wasn't expecting. And that really pivoted my life in a way that I had never imagined.
Interesting. It's interesting how one person just at the right time can make a big difference in someone's life.
It is. It's one decision. I mean, I could have said no and I would have never been in the trucking industry.
Yeah. And look at you now. So what would what's next for you? What's your next big challenge you're going to tackle?
Well, I still have the radio show. I've been doing that 9 years. So that's every Saturday on SiriusXM, the Road Dog Trucking channel, which you mentioned. I think I'm kind of thinking I'd like to write another book. Right now, I've been doing a lot of podcasts, a lot of speaking opportunities, attending a lot of events where they've been buying my book and I get to autograph, which is fun. So I want to kind of wrap up this one, but I've got some thoughts for maybe focusing on women in leadership roles in the supply chain, telling their
Oh,
stories.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost like a snapshot of everyone else's memoir, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. So if you could go back and talk to Ellen from 2007, what would you tell her?
I would say be persistent, just keep fighting because you're going to get there. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I just kept moving forward because there were times when even with the Women in Trucking Association, we hit some really rough patches and I was ready to throw in the towel. And I did some real soul searching and talked to some very smart people and decided that my goal in life was to empower women. And that's always been, like my thesis was about women married to professional drivers. And so I figured what better place to be than heading Women in Trucking, because that's how I can empower women. So I will tell you, Matt, the very first year we had our conference, we had 300 people at the conference, which should be about 11 years ago. The last year I was there, we had 1,800 people at our conference. That's
Wow, that's amazing.
standing up in front of 1,800, mostly women, 85% women is so, I just felt like I'm helping them. I'm offering them opportunities and resources. And so many women would come up to me and say, thank you for starting this organization. And that was my goal in life, was to empower women, see women succeeding, especially in a male populated environment, and to see them lifting each other up. And that's been very rewarding. And I
Yeah,
have to
that does
add,
sound rewarding. Yeah,
since you asked what's next, I do have three granddaughters. So, and I
nice.
have an airplane. I think I mentioned I was going to, I was going to school for aviation. So I have a little Cessna 172 that the weather's getting greater and better in Wisconsin. So I can't wait to get up in the air again.
Nice. I love it. Yeah, we have some granddaughters as well. They are amazing. It's always fun. So what kind of pain points are there out there for just logistics and trucking in general? Like what are some of the big challenges that you guys face?
Well, one of the challenges that I wrote about in the book that I wish that I had been able to address in a better way was harassment. So many women will tell me that they've been harassed, they've been, cat calls or jokes and things like that. And I just that just needs to stop. There's no reason for anyone to chide a woman for doing a man's job, quote unquote man's
Right?
job. And the other thing is I have always had an issue with putting women in the cab of a truck with a male trainer and sending them out for weeks at a time. That to me is just wrong. And it's because one company did have a same gender training policy and they got sued by the EEOC because it took longer to find a female trainer. And so now all these companies are gender blind and they'll stick a woman in the cab of a truck with a male trainer for weeks. And I just think that's just wrong. But there are best practices. One of them is put them in a hotel. I mean, it's not that hard to find a hotel and let one of them sleep in the hotel. And
Yeah.
so they're safe. But again, I talk about safety, and it's not safe when you've got a male trainer who's maybe not, you hear stories all the time of women who have been harassed or worse in the cab of a truck. So that needs to stop.
Yeah, has that improved as with each generation or has it really stayed the same or gotten worse?
You know, People just don't have empathy these days. They don't try to put themselves in someone else's shoes. And so I think that adds to the problem. So if I finish CDL school and I go to a carrier and they go, well, Ellen, you're assigned, Bill Jones as your trainer, get your bags, get your clothes. You're going out with them for 3 weeks until you learn, all of our company policies and equipment and things like that. I think I would just turn around and say, no, sorry. Here's my example. And I tell this when I stand up in front of executives. So, Matt, do you have a daughter?
I do.
Okay. So, what if your daughter calls you one day and says, Dad, I just finished training. I'm so excited. I'm working in the supply chain and I'm going to start traveling and I'm just a little uncomfortable because I have to share a hotel room with my boss. What would be your response?
Well, I'd ask if her boss was a man or a woman. So that would
Well,
be different.
I should have said
But
male
still
boss.
the power play too, right? Even if it is a woman, that could be, not it'd be challenging and probably inappropriate regardless.
Very inappropriate. And yet we're the only industry, because even airplanes have enclosed sleeping areas, trains, I've checked them all, believe me, rail, they all have separate areas for women as opposed to men for sleeping. And so why can't the trucking industry figure something out?
Yeah, well, I think that's just one of those artifacts that has just come along because it started with probably 99% men driving trucks back in the 70s and they just didn't think about it. Or I don't know, maybe I'm just putting my rose-colored glasses on it. I don't know.
No, you're right. It used to be 30 years ago, it used to be, do you smoke? Do you smoke? All right, you're going out with each other. And
Yep.
two non-smokers, that's basically how they were matched. And now we Women in Trucking offers an anti-harassment employment guide where you sit down and talk about, so what religion are you? Do we not discuss religion or do we not discuss politics? Because if we're on two sides of an extreme, maybe we need to take that off the table and set up boundaries and say, we will not discuss that. Or do you have any allergies that I need to be aware of so I don't bring peanuts in the cab? Or do you not like my perfume? Or things like that. Do you not want me eating spicy foods in the cab? Those conversations need to happen before they get in the truck. And once you set those boundaries, then if someone crosses those boundaries, that's bordering on harassment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm down with spicy and I love peanuts, so I'm good. So what's one thing you wish I would have asked?
Maybe what motivates me.
All right, that's a great one.
And I guess what motivates me is when I see people succeeding and I see the smiles on their faces and I see them advancing in their career, and I feel like I had some small part of that. That's my reward, and that's what motivates me. And I'm still doing it. I still talk to drivers all the time. I talk to female leaders in the trucking industry. And if there's a way that I can help them, and that's what I always do, I would always come up to them and say, how can I support you?
Excellent. I love that. So if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that other than buying your book? That's
Well,
step one.
my website is ellenvoya.com, so they can reach me there. Also, I still have, I'm still the founder of Women in Trucking, so I still have Ellen at womenintrucking.org as my email, so they can find me at womenintrucking.org. Click under the staff and you'll find founder, or just go to ellenvoya.com and they can even order my book off there.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. And thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you again in the next episode.
All right. Thanks, Matt.